Your brother earned it. Dad told me they handed him the house, the money, the business. 1 month later, Mom texted, mortgage is due. I answered, ask your heir. Can you imagine dedicating 15 years of your life to building something, pouring your heart and soul into it, only to have it ripped away and handed to someone who actively helped destroy it? And then, years later, for them to come begging for help? Just last month, my phone buzzed with a message from my mother that sent shivers down my spine. Mortgage is due. Can we talk? 3 years earlier, my parents had practically disowned me, handing our multi-million-dollar family business, everything, to my utterly incompetent younger brother, Ryan. His name was supposed to carry the legacy. Mine, apparently, meant nothing. So what the hell happened next for them to come crawling back? Growing up in our sprawling colonial home in the suburbs of Boston, I always felt like I was living in Ryan's shadow. Our family story started with my grandfather, William Patterson. He built Patterson Construction from his garage in 1965 with nothing but grit and a pickup truck. My father, Thomas, expanded it into a regional powerhouse. But the moment my little brother Ryan was born, when I was 7, my dad's face lit up in a way it never did for me. Finally, a Patterson to carry on the family name, he declared, as if I hadn't existed for the past 7 years. That moment set the tone for the next 2.5 decades. From the beginning, the difference in how we were treated was subtle, but it was unmistakable, a constant, gnawing sense of being less. For Ryan's 5th birthday, he got a custom playhouse built by the company crew. For my 12th that same year, a cake and a bookstore gift card. When I brought home straight A's, my mom would say, "That's nice, honey," before turning her attention to Ryan's C in math, praising him for just trying to improve. My mother, Nancy, wasn't openly biased, but she enabled my father's blatant favoritism. She'd whisper, "Your father just has traditional values, he doesn't mean anything by it," after some particularly painful snub. By high school, I developed a strategy, excellence. If I couldn't win their affection through existence, perhaps achievement would do the trick. I joined every business club, became president of the Future Business Leaders of America, and graduated salutatorian. Ryan, meanwhile, barely scraped by, spending more time at parties than in class. I still remember overhearing my dad after Ryan was caught drinking at a school dance. "Boys will be boys," he chuckled. "Just don't get caught next time." 3 months earlier, I'd been grounded for a week for missing curfew by 15 minutes after a study group. It was a slap in the face. When it came to college, I specifically majored in business management with a focus on construction, not because it was my passion, but because I desperately thought it would finally earn my father's respect. I wanted to show him I was serious about the family business. Ryan, he bounced between 3 different majors before landing on communications because it was easy. The summer before my senior year, I interned at Patterson Construction. I arrived early, stayed late, absorbed everything. Dad barely acknowledged my presence, assigning me to file paperwork. Ryan, home from his sophomore year, was invited to client meetings and job sites. "Ryan needs to learn the business from the ground up," Dad explained, utterly missing the bitter irony. I was furious. Despite everything, I loved our business. I saw its potential and genuinely wanted to be part of its future. Every summer and holiday break, I worked different positions, learning names, processes, and ideas from everyone. Christmas of my senior year, I presented Dad with a detailed plan for expanding into green building practices. He glanced at the cover, said, "We'll see," and set it aside. That night, he spent 2 hours teaching Ryan how to read blueprints, even though Ryan showed zero interest. Mom tried to comfort me. "Your father just connects better with Ryan. He doesn't know how to relate to a daughter in business." I pointed out that several major construction companies in our area were run by women. She just shrugged and changed the subject. By the time I graduated, I'd accepted I would never be the favorite, but I was determined to prove my worth through results. I truly believed actions spoke louder than words, and eventually, my contributions would be undeniable. Looking back, I realized the crushing naivety in that hope. No amount of excellence can overcome entrenched favoritism, especially when it's reinforced by traditional gender expectations. Maybe that was my greatest strength or my biggest weakness. I refused to walk away from a family and a business I loved, even when every sign pointed to the fact that my place in both would always be secondary. I worked 3 part-time jobs through college to pay my expenses. Ryan. Full ride from the bank of mom and dad. Luxury apartment. New car every 2 years. Tuition, rent, meal plan, and a monthly allowance that exceeded most entry-level salaries. When I asked why they wouldn't help me, Dad said, "You need to learn the value of hard work." As if Ryan didn't. I graduated summa cum laude with a double major. Ryan barely scraped by with a 2.3 GPA after 5.5 years. At my graduation dinner, Dad raised a toast to Megan, who always does things by the book. At Ryan's graduation 6 months later, he wept openly, "To my son, who will carry the Patterson name into the future of our business." The insult was profound. When I officially joined Patterson Construction, I was placed in an entry-level estimating position, despite my qualifications, and given a starting salary lower than new hires with less education. "You need to understand every aspect of the business from the ground up," Dad explained. 3 weeks later, Ryan was installed as Vice President of Client Relations, complete with a corner office and company car. It was a gut punch. My first year, I identified nearly $400,000 in potential savings through more efficient material ordering. I presented my findings to Dad. He nodded, "Interesting," and moved on to Ryan's presentation about hosting a company golf tournament. The constant disappointment was exhausting, yet I continued to excel. I became known as the problem solver. When shipments were delayed, I found alternatives. When subcontractors failed, I had backups. I built relationships with everyone. One project still stands out. We were building a medical complex with a tight deadline. Our project manager quit. Ryan was supposed to step in, but he was on a 3-week European vacation. Dad was in a panic until I volunteered. I worked 14-hour days for 6 weeks straight, renegotiated contracts, reorganized schedules, personally supervised critical phases. We finished 2 days early and under budget. The client was so impressed, they immediately contracted us for their next expansion. At the completion ceremony, I stood in the background while Dad and Ryan, who had returned just in time, cut the ribbon. The CEO specifically asked for me, shook my hand, and said, "This wouldn't have happened without you." Dad overheard, looked uncomfortable, then clapped Ryan on the shoulder. "The Patterson men know how to deliver." I was seething. I lived modestly in a small 1-bedroom apartment, drove a 10-year-old Honda. Ryan bought a waterfront condo, expensed client lunches, drove a company BMW. I built my savings. Ryan accumulated credit card debt that Mom and Dad periodically paid off. The company continued to grow, largely due to my systems and client relationships. I even created a new division focusing on sustainable construction, attracting prestigious clients. Dad took credit for it in industry publications, despite having initially dismissed my proposal. Ryan's contributions were less tangible. He charmed at galas, was photogenic in marketing. His projects, over budget, behind schedule, always needing me to salvage them. During my 5th year, we faced a major crisis. A huge commercial project was collapsing because Ryan approved design changes without calculating structural implications. The client was threatening legal action. Ryan was conveniently sick the week it all came to light. I spent 2 weeks negotiating, securing financing, personally supervising remediation. The project was saved, but profits were slashed. When the dust settled, Dad called me in. For a moment, I thought recognition was finally coming. "You've done good work cleaning up the situation," he said. "But in the future, consult with me before making financial commitments of this magnitude. Ryan made a mistake, but he's learning. We need to support him." I sat there stunned into silence. 10 years of dedication, and I was still subordinate to my brother, who couldn't even show up when things got difficult. That night, I seriously considered leaving. But I'd invested so much of myself in Patterson Construction that walking away felt like admitting defeat. Besides, where would I go? This was the family business. My business, too. Or so I thought. The evening that changed everything began normally. Mom invited Ryan and me to Sunday dinner. Dad had an important announcement. I assumed it was about the new office building I'd researched, or maybe the expansion into commercial real estate. I arrived early, bottle of Dad's favorite scotch in hand. The house looked neglected. Ryan arrived 20 minutes late, no apology. Mom fussed over him. Dad beamed when Ryan mentioned putting a deposit down on a boat. No one asked about the massive contract I'd just secured. During dinner, Dad cleared his throat. I've been thinking about the future of Patterson Construction, he began. I'm not getting any younger, and it's time to plan for succession. My heart quickened. This was it. After 15 years, surely he recognized my contributions. Your mother and I have decided it's time to start stepping back from day-to-day operations, he continued. We want to travel, enjoy our golden years, and watch the business thrive under new leadership. I sat up straighter, mentally reviewing my own transition plan. Therefore, Dad said, turning towards Ryan, we decided to transfer ownership of Patterson Construction to Ryan, effective immediately. The room started spinning. I gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. Additionally, Dad continued, as if he hadn't just shattered my entire world, we'll be transferring the house and our investment accounts to Ryan as well. He'll need these assets to secure the company's future growth. What about Megan? Mom asked quietly, the first indication that perhaps this hadn't been a unanimous decision. Dad barely glanced my way. We're offering Megan a generous severance package in recognition of her years. 3 months' salary in her company car. That's it. I finally found my voice. 15 years of my life, and I get 3 months' pay, while Ryan gets everything. Your brother deserves it, Dad said firmly, his tone indicating the matter was settled. He's a Patterson man. The company should stay with the family name. I'm a Patterson too, I said, my voice shaking. Until you marry, Dad replied dismissively. Besides, Ryan has a vision for the company's future. Ryan actually smirked across the table. Don't worry, sis. I might find a place for you in the new organization, maybe in HR or something. I looked at Mom, hoping for support, but she stared at her plate. We just want what's best for the company, she murmured. What's best for the company? I stood up, knocking my chair backward. Ryan doesn't know the first thing about running this business. He can't read a balance sheet. He's never completed a project on time. And half the crews refuse to work with him because he doesn't know what he's talking about. That's enough. Dad slammed his hand on the table. This decision is final. The paperwork has already been prepared. Did you ever intend to include me in the company's future? I asked, tears threatening. Dad's expression softened slightly. Megan, you're smart. You'll land on your feet. But Patterson Construction needs a Patterson at the helm. It's tradition. A male Patterson, you mean? I said bitterly. Don't make this about gender, Ryan interjected. It's about who Dad trusts to carry on his legacy. I looked around the table at my family. Dad, resolute in his decision. Mom, unwilling to challenge him. Ryan, barely containing his triumph. 32 years of trying to prove myself, of loving people who would never value me equally, crashed down around me. Congratulations on your retirement, I said coldly to my parents. And congratulations on your inheritance, I added to Ryan. I hope you all get exactly what you deserve. I walked out without looking back, ignoring my mother's frantic calls. In my car, I finally let the tears come. Not just for the lost inheritance, but for the recognition I'd never receive, for the wasted years trying to earn love that should have been unconditional. The next morning, I submitted my resignation, effective immediately. Dad called, not to apologize, but to remind me about the non-compete clause. You can't work for any competitor within 100 miles for 2 years, he said, as if that was his primary concern. I wouldn't dream of it, I replied before hanging up. I cleared out my office on a Sunday when no one would be there. 15 years of work fit into 2 cardboard boxes. As I took one last look at the company I'd helped build, I made myself a promise. I would never again allow my worth to be determined by someone else's inability to see it. The first month after leaving Patterson Construction was the hardest. I rented a furnished apartment in Chicago, as far from Boston as I could reasonably go while staying in the construction industry. Each morning, I woke up questioning my decision. Each night, I reminded myself that staying would have slowly destroyed my soul. I allowed myself 2 weeks to grieve. I cried. I screamed into pillows. I wrote scathing letters to my family that I never sent. Then, I got to work rebuilding my life from scratch. My severance package barely covered my first month's rent and security deposit. I dipped into savings to furnish my apartment minimally and set up my new business, Patterson Consulting. Keeping my name was a small act of defiance. I created a website, business cards, a LinkedIn profile emphasizing my experience without mentioning it was a family business. Cold calls and networking became my daily routine. I introduced myself to everyone in the Chicago construction industry. Most doors remained firmly closed. Construction consulting from an unknown woman in a male-dominated industry wasn't an easy sell. My first client came through pure desperation, theirs not mine. A mid-sized developer had fired their project manager mid-construction and needed immediate help. 3 months behind, significantly over budget, I offered to work for a reduced fee with a bonus structure tied to getting the project back on track. For 6 weeks, I worked from 6 a.m. until midnight, renegotiating, reorganizing, identifying costly mistakes. By the end, we'd cut delays in half and identified enough savings to offset the overruns. The developer was impressed enough to refer me to 2 colleagues. Suddenly, I had a small client base and positive references. I created a niche, the construction consultant you call when things go wrong. I was a problem solver, not a competitor. 4 months into my new venture, I received a call from Martin Chin, Patterson Construction's former head estimator. "I quit," he announced without preamble. "Ryan fired Dolores and Jim last week. Said they were too expensive after 30 years. I couldn't stay." Martin filled me in on Ryan's chaos. Experienced project managers replaced with fraternity brothers. Reliable subcontractors dropped for cheaper alternatives. The sustainable construction division I'd built dismantled because Ryan thought it was too complicated. "The place is falling apart," Martin concluded. "Your father is trying to keep his hands off, but he looks physically ill every time he visits." I thanked Martin, but maintained my boundary. Their business was no longer my concern. Still, I couldn't help but feel a profound professional vindication. The skills and knowledge I brought had been valuable, whether my family recognized it or not. As my first year in Chicago progressed, so did my business. I hired 2 assistants and moved into a small but professional office. I developed a reputation for honesty and results. Unlike my father, who believed in hierarchical management, I created collaborative relationships with clients. I explained my recommendations clearly, involving them in decisions. This approach resonated particularly well with female developers and project owners, a growing demographic. By my 15th month, I had a waiting list and was considering expanding. Meanwhile, updates from former colleagues painted an increasingly dire picture of Patterson Construction. Ryan had secured several large contracts by underbidding competitors, not realizing they'd operate at a loss. Quality issues emerged. 2 major clients filed lawsuits. I maintained professional distance, but a twinge of sadness remained. Patterson Construction was my grandfather's legacy. Hundreds of families depended on it. Ryan's mismanagement wasn't just hurting our family, it was affecting loyal employees. One evening, an email from Barbara, my parents' neighbor for 20 years, arrived. Rumors of financial difficulties. Their country club membership lapsed, annual vacation canceled. Company trucks no longer displayed the Patterson logo, they were plain white. I nearly called my mother that night, but stopped myself. They had made their choice. They had entrusted everything to Ryan, believing his DNA and gender made him more worthy than my years of demonstrated competence. Whatever consequences came were theirs to bear. Instead, I channeled my energy into growing my business. I expanded into preventative consulting. I developed a training program for new project managers. I hired 3 more consultants, all women with extensive construction experience who had faced similar barriers. By the end of my 2nd year in Chicago, Patterson Consulting was a respected name in the Midwest construction industry. I had proven to myself that my success at Patterson Construction hadn't been a fluke or nepotism. If anything, I had succeeded despite the obstacles. I bought a small, elegant condo, my first real home that was truly mine. As I unpacked, I found a photo of my grandfather, his expression showing the same pride and determination I now felt. I realized I was carrying on his true legacy, not through a name on a building, but through hard work, integrity, and resilience. That night, I slept better than I had in years, finally at peace. I had no idea the next morning would bring my past crashing back into my carefully reconstructed life. Ryan's approach to running Patterson Construction could best be described as a toddler playing with blocks, knocking down established structures for the sheer pleasure of destruction, with no plan for rebuilding. Within 6 months, he'd undone decades of careful business development. His first major decision was firing the company's long-standing accounting firm, replacing them with his college roommate's brother, newly minted CPA, eager to please, and utterly clueless about construction specifics. By tax season, the books were in such disarray they needed a forensic accountant at tremendous expense. Ryan's next brilliant move: restructuring the management team. He eliminated 3 project managers with over 20 years of experience, claiming they resisted fresh ideas. In their place, he hired 4 fraternity brothers, none with construction experience, creating executive titles like Chief Innovation Officer and Director of Brand Experience, complete with 6-figure salaries and company vehicles. The Patterson Construction Office, once a model of efficiency, transformed into something resembling a frat house. Ryan installed a ping-pong table and a kegerator in the conference room, claiming it would boost creativity. Monday morning staff meetings were replaced with vision sessions, where Ryan rambled about his expansion ideas while his new executives nodded enthusiastically. Meanwhile, actual construction projects floundered without oversight. The green building division I had established, accounting for nearly 30% of revenue, was dismantled because Ryan found the certification requirements too complicated. Long-standing clients who had sought us out for sustainable building took their business elsewhere. Ryan's approach to winning new business was equally disastrous. He slashed bid prices to undercut competitors without understanding the actual costs. Patterson Construction began securing contracts guaranteed to operate at a loss before the first shovel hit dirt. When estimators tried to explain, Ryan accused them of being negative. The company fleet, once meticulously maintained, fell into disrepair as Ryan redirected the maintenance budget to lease a new Porsche as his client development vehicle. Equipment broke down on job sites, causing delays that triggered penalty clauses. Subcontractors who had worked with us for generations found themselves waiting 90 days for payment instead of 30. Many refused new Patterson projects, forcing Ryan to hire unknown, unreliable subcontractors. By the 9-month mark, the company's cash reserves, built over decades, were depleted. Ryan began using the company's line of credit for regular operating expenses, a cardinal sin in construction management. Interest payments alone were eating up thousands each month. My parents, who planned a comfortable retirement, found themselves increasingly drawn back into the business. Dad would stop by job sites, wincing at obvious quality issues, but hesitant to undermine his son. Mom started handling accounts payable when vendors called their house demanding payment. Still, they made excuses. "He's still learning," Dad would tell concerned employees. "The market is challenging," Mom would explain to friends. The company's reputation, built over 3 generations, eroded rapidly. General contractors looked elsewhere. Our bonding capacity was downgraded due to financial instability, limiting the size of projects we could bid on. 12 months into Ryan's leadership, the first lawsuit arrived. A commercial client sued for substantial damages when structural issues emerged in a recently completed office building. Investigation revealed Ryan had approved substituting lower-grade materials to save costs. The insurance carrier denied the claim, citing willful negligence. A second lawsuit followed when an apartment complex developed extensive water damage traced to improperly installed flashing, a basic construction element any experienced project manager would verify. The settlement depleted what remained of the cash reserves. Around the 15-month mark, Ryan made his most catastrophic decision. Without consulting financial advisors, he used the company's remaining borrowing capacity to purchase an adjacent property for a planned headquarters expansion. The timing couldn't have been worse. The commercial real estate market was at its peak, and he paid well above market value. Within 6 months, property values declined, leaving the company upside down on the loan. His personal spending continued unabated. He bought a boat, then a vacation property in Florida, business development trips to Las Vegas and the Caribbean, company credit cards maxed out at high-end restaurants and luxury hotels. With the business hemorrhaging cash, Ryan began tapping into my parents' personal finances. First came short-term loans from their retirement accounts, then mortgaging the family home that had been paid off for years. Finally, liquidating investment accounts intended for their retirement. By the 18-month mark, my parents' comfortable retirement had transformed into a financial nightmare. The company was operating at a significant monthly loss. Their personal savings were depleted. The family home, once a symbol of success, now had a mortgage they couldn't afford. Dad, who planned to golf, was back on job sites at 68, trying to salvage troubled projects. Through former colleagues, I heard he had aged 10 years and 18 months. My mother developed anxiety-related health issues. Ryan, meanwhile, remained in denial. He blamed the economy, disloyal employees, demanding clients. He refused to acknowledge his role, continuing to draw his executive salary even as the company fell behind on payroll for regular employees. The final straw came when the bank called the company's line of credit due to multiple covenant violations. With no cash and no assets left to pledge, Patterson Construction faced imminent bankruptcy. The business my grandfather started, my father built, and I had helped modernize, was weeks away from collapse. That's when my phone lit up with that text from my mother. "Mortgage is due. Can we talk?" The text from my mother arrived at exactly 7:13 a.m. on a Tuesday. "Mortgage is due. Can we talk?" My first instinct was to ignore it. After all, I hadn't heard from her in nearly 2 years, except for generic Christmas cards. But curiosity gnawed at me. Mortgage is due. The family home had been paid off for over a decade. I responded with a single question mark. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. Finally, we had to take out a mortgage to help the company. "We can't make this month's payment." I put my phone down and went about my morning routine. Coffee, shower, professional attire. The familiar rhythm helped me process this unexpected intrusion from my past. By the time I reached my office, 3 more texts had arrived. "Please, Megan, we're in trouble. Ryan says it's temporary. Your father won't admit it, but we need help." I muted the conversation and focused on my day's appointments. My business was thriving precisely because I maintained professional boundaries and focused on solutions, not drama. My family's financial problems were not my emergency. But as the day progressed, the texts continued. By afternoon, even my father had messaged, "We need to talk. Business matter." Coming from a man who had effectively disowned me from the family business, the irony was almost laughable. After my last meeting, I sat in my office overlooking the Chicago skyline and contemplated my options. I could continue ignoring them, which would be justifiable. I could send money, which would only enable their dysfunction without addressing the underlying issues. Or I could engage, but set clear boundaries. I decided on the third option, not out of family obligation, but professional curiosity. How bad had things really gotten? I called my mother at exactly 5:30 p.m. She answered on the first ring. "Megan, thank God. I've been waiting all day." "I had meetings," I said neutrally. "What's going on with the mortgage?" What followed was a 20-minute monologue of financial disaster. The house had been mortgaged to secure a business loan when the company's credit was downgraded. That loan had covered losses on 3 major projects Ryan had underbid. The monthly payment was $4,300, substantial for a couple whose retirement income had been decimated by Ryan's business loans from their personal accounts. "We're 3 months behind," Mom admitted. "The bank called yesterday. They're starting foreclosure proceedings next week if we don't catch up." "Where's Ryan in all this?" I asked. A pause. "He's trying his best," she said unconvincingly. "The market is challenging right now. Mom, I work in the same industry. The market is booming. Well-run construction companies can't hire fast enough to keep up with demand." Another pause, longer this time. "Your father would like to speak with you," she said finally, passing the phone. Dad's voice had aged, the once authoritative tone now wavering slightly. "Megan, thank you for calling." "I'm listening," I said, neither hostile nor welcoming. He cleared his throat. "The situation at Patterson Construction has become complicated. We're facing some temporary cash flow issues that have affected our personal finances." "Define temporary and complicated," I replied. What emerged over the next hour was far worse than I had imagined. The company was essentially insolvent. Multiple lawsuits from clients and suppliers were pending. The bank had frozen their business accounts. Ryan had hired and fired 3 CFOs in 18 months, each quitting when they realized the extent of the financial mismanagement. Employees hadn't received paychecks for 3 weeks. Tax liens had been filed for unpaid payroll taxes. "Where is Ryan now?" I asked. "He's in Florida, Dad admitted reluctantly. At the condo. He says he's meeting with potential investors, but, he trailed off. But he's probably on his boat. I finished. Dad didn't confirm or deny. Instead, he got to the point. We need your help, Megan. Financial help. I asked more than that, he said. We need you to come back. To help us salvage what's left of the company. I nearly dropped the phone. After everything that had happened, after giving Ryan everything and me nothing, they wanted me to return and fix his mess? You want me to rescue the company that you told me I didn't deserve to be part of? The bitterness I thought I'd processed bubbled up unexpectedly. I made a mistake, Dad said quietly. We all did. But this isn't just about us anymore. There are 47 families depending on Patterson Construction for their livelihoods, people who did nothing wrong except trust our family to lead responsibly. He was playing the guilt card expertly, appealing to the sense of responsibility he had instilled in me. The worst part was, he wasn't wrong. Innocent employees were suffering because of my family's poor decisions. What exactly are you proposing? I asked. Come back as COO. Full authority to make whatever changes are necessary. Ryan will step back to a business development role only. And my ownership stake. A hesitation. We could offer you 20% of the company. I laughed out loud. 20% of a company that's effectively bankrupt? That's your offer after I built a successful business from scratch, while Ryan drove yours into the ground. 30%. Dad countered weakly. This call is over, I said. If you're serious about my help, have your lawyer draw up papers for 51% ownership, transferable to me immediately upon verification of the company's financial position. Otherwise, good luck with the foreclosure. Megan, be reasonable, Dad started. I am being reasonable. You're asking me to leave a successful business I built to rescue one that you explicitly told me I didn't deserve to own. My terms are non-negotiable. I'll talk to your mother, he said finally. Do that. And while you're at it, talk to Ryan. Explain that his vacation is over. If I come back, he works under my direction or not at all. After hanging up, I sat in my quiet office watching the Chicago lights come on as dusk fell. The conversation had left me shaken, not because of their predicament, but because of my response to it. 2 years ago, I would have immediately rushed to help, regardless of the terms. I would have sacrificed my own interests to save the family business out of a misplaced sense of duty. Now I understood my worth. I had built something valuable on my own terms. If my family wanted to access my skills and experience, they would have to acknowledge that value appropriately. No more giving everything and receiving nothing in return. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Your father is talking to the lawyer tomorrow. Please help us, Megan. We have nowhere else to turn. I left it unanswered. Their crisis had simmered for months. It could wait another day while I considered my options carefully. Whatever decision I made would be based on business logic, not emotional manipulation or family obligation. For the first time in our relationship, I had the leverage. The question was, what would I do with it? 3 days after the desperate call, I boarded a flight to Boston. In my briefcase were 2 documents prepared by my attorney, one for a consulting agreement, the other for a transfer of controlling interest in Patterson Construction. I had no idea which, if either, would be signed. I rented a car rather than asking my parents to pick me up, maintaining the professional distance this situation required. The drive to their house, the house I grew up in, felt surreal. The property looked neglected, overgrown landscaping, peeling paint. The Patterson Construction sign was gone. My mother opened the door before I could knock, pulling me into a tight hug that I didn't return. My father stood awkwardly in the entryway, looking older and smaller than I remembered. Ryan was noticeably absent. Where's Ryan? I asked after minimal pleasantries. He's coming, Dad said, checking his watch. He should be here soon. We moved to the living room where financial documents were spread across the coffee table, bank statements, legal notices, tax forms, the physical evidence of their financial collapse. Before we begin, I said, I need to understand exactly what I'm walking into. I want to see everything. Bank statements, credit card bills, loan documents, lawsuits, tax notices. Everything. For the next 2 hours, my parents walked me through the disaster. The company had over $3.7 million in debt with virtually no assets remaining. Suppliers were refusing deliveries without upfront payment. 3 major clients had terminated contracts. The family home had a $780,000 mortgage with no payments made in 4 months. Where did all the money go? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Dad hesitated, but Mom spoke up. Ryan made some questionable decisions. As if on cue, the front door opened, and Ryan strolled in, tan from his Florida business trip, designer sunglasses perched on his head. He stopped short when he saw me. "Family reunion," he said with forced casualness. "Nobody told me you were coming." "Sit down, Ryan," I said. "We're discussing how you destroyed a 3-generation family business in less than 2 years." His face flushed. "That's not fair." "The market conditions." "Save it," I interrupted. "I've seen the numbers. This has nothing to do with market conditions and everything to do with incompetence and embezzlement." "Embezzlement?" he blustered. "That's a serious accusation." I pulled out a document from my briefcase, a spreadsheet I had prepared, analyzing his personal expenditures charged to the company. Country club memberships, first-class flights, the boat, the Florida condo, all purchased with company funds while projects were failing and employees weren't being paid. Ryan looked to our father for support, but Dad stared at the floor. "I was entitled to compensation as CEO," Ryan tried. "Not when the company is insolvent," I countered. "That's textbook fraudulent conveyance, possibly criminal depending on how the funds were documented." The color drained from his face. For perhaps the first time in his life, Ryan realized he couldn't charm or bluster his way out of a situation. "I've reviewed everything," I said, addressing my parents while ignoring Ryan. "There are 2 options on the table. Option 1, I come in as a consultant, charging my standard rates to develop a restructuring plan that you implement. Option 2, I take controlling interest in the company, 51%, and full authority to execute whatever changes I deem necessary." "This is ridiculous," Ryan interjected. "You can't just waltz in and take control of my company." "Your company?" I raised an eyebrow. "The company you ran into the ground? The company that's weeks away from bankruptcy? That company?" "Megan is right," Dad said quietly. We all turned to him in surprise. It was the first time I'd ever heard my father criticize Ryan directly. The shock silenced even Ryan. "We gave you every advantage, Ryan. Resources, opportunities, authority, and you squandered all of it." "We'll take option 2, Dad continued, his voice firm. "Full control to Megan." Ryan started to protest, but Dad held up his hand. "It's done, Ryan. If you want any hope of salvaging your reputation or staying out of legal trouble, you'll cooperate fully with whatever Megan decides." My mother nodded in agreement, tears in her eyes. I pushed the ownership transfer documents across the table. My parents signed without further discussion. Just like that, I became the majority owner of Patterson Construction. "Now what?" Ryan asked sullenly. "Now the real work begins," I replied. "Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. at the office. Everyone, including you, Ryan." The next morning, I arrived at Patterson Construction headquarters at 6:30 a.m. The building that had once been a source of family pride looked shabby and neglected. Inside was worse. Disorganized paperwork, outdated computers, empty desks where longtime employees had once sat. My parents arrived at 6:50. Ryan at 7:20, coffee in hand, no apology for his tardiness. I gathered them in the conference room, now devoid of the ping-pong table. "Here's how this works," I began. "This is a rescue operation, not a family reunion. I'll make decisions based on what's best for the company's survival, not anyone's feelings or expectations. Anyone who can't accept that should leave now." No one moved. "Good. First order of business, Ryan. You're removed from all operational and financial responsibilities. Effective immediately. You'll work exclusively in client relations, under my direct supervision. Your salary is reduced to match other department heads. Company credit cards canceled. Company car returned. Florida condo sold." Ryan started to protest, but Dad placed a warning hand on his arm. He subsided, glaring at me. "Mom and Dad, you'll serve in advisory capacities only. You have institutional knowledge that's valuable, but no decision-making authority. Your retirement benefits are suspended until the company is profitable again." My mother nodded. My father looked pained, but didn't object. "I've contacted key former employees who were terminated or quit under Ryan's leadership. 7 have agreed to return, including Martin Chin and Dolores Rodriguez, who will resume their previous roles in estimating and office management. I outlined the rest of my restructuring plan, renegotiating with creditors, meeting personally with dissatisfied clients, implementing strict financial controls, selling non-essential assets to generate operating capital. I made it clear that the recovery would be painful and required sacrifices from everyone. Over the next 3 months, I split my time between Chicago, where my assistant managed ongoing Patterson consulting projects, and Boston, where I implemented the rescue plan. I worked 16-hour days, 7 days a week. I made difficult decisions, including laying off Ryan's fraternity brothers and terminating expensive office leases. The turnaround wasn't immediate, but progress came steadily. We negotiated payment plans with suppliers who respected my reputation. 2 major clients agreed to reinstate contracts with revised timelines after I personally guaranteed quality oversight. The bank restructured loans based on our realistic recovery plan. Ryan, to my surprise, proved somewhat useful once limited to client relations only. Stripped of financial authority, but still able to charm potential clients, he secured several small but profitable projects that helped stabilize cash flow. He seemed humbled by the experience of nearly losing everything, though I remained cautious. 6 months into the rescue operation, Patterson Construction was stable. Not thriving, but no longer at imminent risk of collapse. I had established systems and training that allowed me to scale back my direct involvement. My parents had downsized to a smaller home, using the proceeds from selling their over-mortgaged property to eliminate personal debt. As for me, I maintained majority ownership but hired an experienced construction executive to handle day-to-day operations in Boston while I returned to my Chicago business full-time. I had proven what I needed to prove to my family, and more importantly, to myself. The most significant change wasn't in the company's financial statements, but in my family's dynamics. My father, who had once dismissed my contributions, now consulted me on every major decision. My mother, who had enabled years of favoritism, apologized tearfully during a private dinner. Even Ryan acknowledged, albeit reluctantly, that the company would have disappeared without my intervention. But the most important transformation was internal. I no longer needed their approval or recognition to validate my worth. I had built a successful business on my own terms, then rescue the family company on my terms. My sense of value came from within, not from external validation. A year after that desperate text about the mortgage, I received another message from my mother. The company showed a profit this quarter. Thank you for saving our legacy. I smiled at the message but didn't immediately reply. Instead, I looked around my Chicago office, at the business I had built from nothing, at the team I had assembled based on merit rather than nepotism. This was my legacy. Not a name on a building or a company passed down through generations, but the knowledge that I had created something valuable through my own efforts. Later that evening, I finally replied to my mother. It was never about the legacy. It was about recognizing worth where it exists, not where tradition dictates it should be. I'm glad you finally see that. The journey from being the overlooked daughter to the company's savior taught me lessons no business school could provide. That sometimes losing everything is the only way to discover your true value. That standing firm in your worth isn't selfish, it's necessary. And most importantly, that the opinions of others, even family, don't define your capabilities or potential. So what about you? Have you ever had to fight to prove your worth to people who should have seen it all along? Or set fierce boundaries with family to protect your peace? Tell me your story in the comments below. I'd love to hear it. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more real-life experiences and lessons learned the hard way. Remember, sometimes the people who should support you the most are the ones who see your value least, until you show them exactly what they stand to lose. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I'll see you in the next one.